Welcome to the Digital Agency Growth Podcast. I'm your host, Dan Englander. I just threw on the recorder so we could just get into it.
I love it, man.
I feel like there's always kind of like a pretense of setup, but then that's usually where the most interesting things are said. And we've done this enough times that, let's see what goes on.
I agree. What's the format now?
This is one of the rare episodes where we have no format. I think the others I ask people specific questions about the thing that they're doing, which I'll probably do at some point. But this is actually a harder episode to do because it takes a lot of practice, I think, to get to the point of just having like a meandering conversation and having it not be boring.
Yeah, like a free flow.
Right. I feel like it takes a lifetime of like entertainment chops and interview chops to figure it out. So this, we'll see how it goes. How are you?
I'm well, man. I'm well. Freezing in Chicago right now, though. Yeah, not my favorite, but it's good. Everything's good.
Why are you in Chicago?
This is where my fiance lives.
Okay, cool. That's right. You mentioned that. How are things at Oyova?
Things are good. Some of the biggest changes I've seen, though, are just the delays on projects based on what people are deeming is happening in the economy. And I got a notice just yesterday where somebody said they were putting all of their marketing and web needs on hold for 2 years. I was like, wow, that's a hell of a forecast, like 2 years. And they're a big retail clothing company that wants to get off of Amazon. It's like their drug, right? They've grown this huge empire on Amazon and they're trying to get away from it. What they're looking at is like, it's going to take them 2 years to actually put everything in place based on where they see sales going.
How does that work? How does that actually happen? So you're just not going to do anything for 2 years? How does that actually play out?
I think they're going to just keep their internal systems. They're going to stay on Amazon. They're not going to redevelop their website because the competitors in their space are huge, right? To give you an example, they probably do like maybe, I don't know, 30, 40 million a year. And their competitors are doing like 250 or more, right? So they're a small fish in some respects, but they've grown substantially over the last 10 years. So according to them, between everything that's happened in China with COVID, because all their stuff is manufactured over there, that's something that they've had to deal with. And also their relationship with Amazon, it's unwinding all those things, right? So I don't know how much you know about Amazon, but Amazon is essentially just like another Google once you have your store on there. You have your pretty much your website that's on there. You have all your ads that go on there. You built out your entire world. And they want to get off that. But what they see is, okay, shifting everything from creative that's happening in China, photography, so on and so forth, moving all that over to the States because they want more of a US feel. They think it's going to take 2 years, which I respect that type of planning. To me, it seems very European. So I don't know if you spoke with companies that are like a couple 100 years old. They think in, like 50-year blocks where we think in quarters. That seems like it's kind of their mentality.
That's interesting. And Amazon's definitely been a big focus on the show recently. Depending on when this goes live, we have another interview with this really sharp lady named Rachel Johnson Greer, who was like an early Amazonian, was there from like 2007 to 2015, and then started an agency, sold it, is now in consulting, kind of doing like CRO on Amazon pages. And what I think is like really interesting about the Amazon agency space is that it's kind of like you have to deal with like the full business life cycle and so many more variables, and dealing with like how inventory affects everything else. One thing that she said that was pretty interesting was like there's actually an element, and I'm sure if like Amazon, maybe you already know this, but like there's an element of you wanting to turn away certain customers because like refunds are going to hurt everything more than conversions. So there's more than like just making a sales page that you're driving to with like Facebook ads or something. It's a completely different dynamic. So there's actually a huge emphasis on making sure to turn away people very strongly on the page, because that's going to be a problem. If you get too many refunds, then you just get shot down.
You get shot down by just essentially your return, or like Amazon is essentially saying, hey, you're costing us too much.
My understanding is the latter. By Amazon, just kind of de-risking or
because there's got to be a scoring on both sides, right? So there has to be scoring. What I'm assuming is on, and we don't do a ton of Amazon, but and this is something for agencies. Like if you want to target new business, target how to get companies off Amazon, because they're getting a 35% chunk. And the more that you get them off, essentially that's just more return that they're going to get, more marketing spend for you as an agency. But there has to be a scoring, from my understanding, on the customer side too. Like, dude, if you're just returning things all the time and then you're complaining, I got to imagine that those people are getting kicked off, or something has to happen, because there's going to be a breaking point there as well.
Yeah, that's my understanding. But I think the other thing is like Amazon, because of the culture there, and I'm sort of parroting stuff that Rachel was talking about, so I might not get it right, but I've also read about this. They've had such a startup culture, and there's been basically every unit of Amazon up until recently has been kind of able to build things and build products internally with like almost complete autonomy, that it's become kind of almost like a black box, right? In terms of like the policies and the compliance and all these sorts of things. So there's just like precious few people that actually get how this stuff works, and I think that that's creating this like hiring frenzy for Amazon talent. And the rumblings I'm hearing is that the big agencies are like finally starting to focus on it as an area to operate. But like you said, like on the other hand, it is kind of this like cruel Old Testament God where it like giveth and taketh, right? So it's like I'm sure there's plenty of brands that are just like, no, we're not going to do that at all. And like you kind of hear the D2C startup brands that aren't even dealing with it as much.
Yeah. And it's just, and there's the 35% that they take, but they're also digging in based on all the fees you're having to build in, whether it's going to be get more attention on there to hire the consultants, like the colleague that you mentioned. Man, it's an expensive foray. But at the end of the day, they control the distribution. So they have the eyeballs and the fingers that click to buy your product. So it makes sense. They built a solid position.
Yeah, and the thing that's interesting about them is like I just think of all the big companies that have kind of sprung up in my 35 years or whatever, and it's like they all got really good at one thing. You had like Google with search and Facebook with building social media communities and so on. IBM started with calculators and computing machines, and that's pretty much what they did for 100 plus years or whatever it is. But Amazon has like done so well in so many different areas, and it's sort of like lightning striking multiple times. That's interesting, and it's hard to say like all the things that made that happen.
Yeah. And I don't even know, come to think of this, like all the other like little niche agencies that even might be out there saying like, yeah, we specialize in Walmart, right? And those might be even areas for people to target based on some of those. But I always look at like an Amazon or something. And I remember when I was in college, there was all the marketing professors. Like, maybe I didn't go to a good school. I went to University of South Florida, which USF stands for You Stay Forever. But everybody was like just pouring over like how amazing Krispy Kreme was, right? They just expanded. And they're like, oh, they're just a donut shop, and they were literally on the cover of one of my marketing books, and they were talking about how they expanded and their culture and all these amazing things. And dude, it was like 2 years later. Like I think I was like done with school, and they're like, "Yeah, that was a complete fucking flop. Like Krispy Kreme is out." And then other people
Yeah.
would say like, "Oh, there's nothing that's ever going to be able to infringe on Walmart." And at the time, I mean, this is right around like when Amazon and like Wikipedia and like all these things are exploding on the internet. And dude, like Amazon has eaten their online lunch like to the T. Talk about missing out on the biggest opportunity.
Yeah.
So the point I'm making is it's just like some of these big behemoths, they're going to start to crumble. Even Google, dude. Google's now with Chat GPT, dude, like they're shaking, man. That's a Bing focused initiative.
Right.
And like what's going to happen with that?
There's a few jumping
I
off
know
points
I'm jumping a
there.
lot a little bit.
No, this is the point of this episode was just to catch you like a deer in headlights and then just start meandering all over the place. Yeah, the AI thing is obviously, the talk of the town and everything. I think where it comes up in our world is in the context of sales, right? So people are like, how is AI going to affect sales and all this sort of thing, and how is it going to be used? And I'm still not too concerned about its impact yet, the sales world, because I still think that there's just kind of a first principles thing where, like, if you're selling anything above approximately $1,000, you're going to have a human to human conversation. The AI is getting good, and maybe in the next few years that can happen. But if you're dealing with a big ticket sale and you have like a limited total addressable market, it's hard to imagine a world in which somebody at a big company is going to feel comfortable talking to an AI to make a six figure or more investment or purchase, right? So if that's the case, then you think about everything before that call in the top of the funnel, and there isn't a huge place for that AI because ultimately it's just going to be parroting things that a real person's saying, and you don't, most people aren't going to want an AI putting words in their mouth without having to approve everything, whether it's a textual message or a deep fake video or something like that. And if you have to approve it all, it kind of like defeats the purpose, right? Because you're losing any sort of scale you'd get from it. I'm not too worried about it there. I think where it's going to get scary is when some genius decides to hook it up to the power grid, right? Or something like that, because that's where you get these non-alignment problems and things that affect your life. And OpenAI, I mean, like the demo they did back in what was it, like summer 2021, was the AI literally creating a website. They gave it simple text, go build a website with XYZ focus, and it did it in 5 seconds. Like that's the thing that I also worry about a little, because it's like, well, maybe it just makes the internet into this wasteland, right? Because like you're already seeing these trends of people leaving social media, people kind of like divesting from the internet, or even just like on a personal qualitative level. I got off Instagram because it was the same stuff we all talk about, stealing my attention. I was going on it all the time. I still sometimes feel like I'm missing out, with friends and memes and the culture. But overall, I think it was the right move because I just noticed that like all the memes and all the jokes just like started hitting less, right? And like I assume that I'm not special, that there's nothing special about me, that there's a lot of people that probably feel the same way. So if that just goes up by tenfold because the whole internet just becomes deep fakes and bots, what does that mean? Like it's sort of just, it seems like it's just going to hasten it becoming a wasteland. Yeah.
It could. And I think just as humans, we have this pessimistic outlook on the future. There's always this dystopian viewpoint of how bad things will be. But I always think the missing element is that we're builders and fixers, and we always kind of like figure it out. And then we're also that toad in that proverbial boiling pot. Sometimes we don't realize how bad things are getting. But as far as social media, I agree with you. I got off Facebook, I got off Instagram for some of the same reasons, but also where you get that group think. It's similar to if you're driving in city traffic and you're using a GPS application like Waze or something, and you're literally just going where everybody's telling you to go, right? And but at the end of the day, you can make another turn. You're like, wow, dude, that just knocked off 4 minutes. Like, if this thing's so damn smart, like, why didn't it do that? Now, that's kind of my thinking with that group hive think that happens on social media, where everybody is just kind of digesting the same information. That being said, I'm excited about like what AI is going to bring to it, but it's not even here yet, right? So like, what is AI? AI is essentially something that can create original thought. It's not, dude. It's literally, we have these scrapers and these rearrangers. There's absolutely no original thought that is being generated. Even if you have Watson that's playing a chess game, all it is these are all just the possible variables of chess moves that is loading in there. It's
Right.
not writing some beautiful poem, which maybe at the end of the day, it will be able to do those things, but it's not. And dude, the sales things that I'm seeing, I get these emails, cold emails, and it's like, oh yeah, this is our new AI tool. And at first I was like, oh wow, how did they do this? And essentially what they did is they took my title and they just said like, this is what somebody's supposed to do in this title, which makes it sound like, oh yeah, that's kind of original. And then they took the city that I live in, St. Petersburg, Florida, and they said, hey, this is something that you should check out there. Well, if you go into like Yelp or Google, it's the number one place that you should look at. Is a very simple thing, but they're claiming it's this artificial intelligence. That's not intelligent. That's literally just logic that anybody could program. So I don't think we're at the point we are yet. I think we could come into that wasteland, but I believe, while that is a possibility, that we're going to figure it out. And there's going to be some type of standard where all that gobbledygook and all that garbage is suppressed in some way or some form. And who knows, it might not be Google that figures out that problem. That might be the next person that emerges that solves it.
Yeah. Well, the funny thing is, I don't necessarily have like a pessimistic dystopian view of it all. I just think that maybe we've wrenched like a lot of juice from the orange of the internet, and that the next technological breakthrough is something that we could actually wrap our hands around, that you could actually touch. This is where I really go off the reservation. But there's a great quote, like Eric Weinstein is one of these guys that has this quote that's like, we got the supercomputer from Star Trek, but none of the other stuff,
I
Uh,
love that quote, man.
yeah, it's great. And the other thing he talks about is like, and I think Peter Thiel covers this too, regardless of what you think of him. He's a genius. You love him or hate him. He
Yeah,
says smart things.
dude, 0 to 1's an amazing book, dude.
Yeah, but it's basically like go and do a restaurant and name all the ways in which it's not 1975. And it's like you're going to point to like your phone and maybe the televisions are smaller, and that's about it.
Mm,
So
yeah,
it could just be that like, we've not rinsed all the juice from the orange in terms of like the functionality and like what a spreadsheet can do. Because basically the AI as it exists now is doing a version of what a spreadsheet does. It's putting information into a different form and making it usable and combining it and so on. But that only takes you so far, right? Because it's like, well, what about all the really cool stuff? What about flying cars? What about renewable infinite clean energy? And the funny thing is like you talk about that sort of thing and it's like, well, that's pie in the sky, that's jets and stuff, but we have a lot of those building blocks already, right? If you look at nuclear subs, that can stay out for 5 years at a time. Like a lot of the
yeah.
technology is kind of there for this stuff. It's more of an issue of nerve and bureaucracy and making it happen.
And people are inherently lazy, right? So I think it was Peter Thiel, and might have even been in his book 0 to 1. It was just talking about where we don't build anything. Like all the things that you're stating are awesome, necessary. That's how we propel humanity forward. But yeah, dude, like, I mean, if you look at the most profitable businesses, like I think number two is, if I looked up the other day, number one is land leasing. Number two is hedge funds.
Yeah.
Like number three is banks. None of those things build anything. And I think there might have been SaaS maybe in the top 10, but other than that, it was essentially the management of funds or just owning this asset, letting other people use it in some form. So with that, yeah, I think that's potentially the thing that's holding us back. Nobody's actually building anything that's substantial to propel us forward. And I don't have the answer to that, but I think it's just addressing that as the problem that we're dealing with.
Yeah, and I obviously don't have any answers either, but and I think that what I wonder about though is that always the natural order of things, that things continue to get built and you keep improving and expanding, or did we just live through the tail end of like an anomalous period of time, right? Like I forgot what book it was. I was reading kind of like an article on this old book that was basically making the point that most of the inventions that have like improved our quality of life, you think about like the microwave, the automobile, indoor heating, were all invented between like 1867 and 1914. Right. And then before that, not much happened. After that, some stuff happened. We got the internet, we got other things. But the question is, are we just sort of trailing off from there?
Yeah, because if you think about it, the breakthroughs to create like a nuclear submarine, man, that's hundreds, if not thousands of people that have to come together just to orchestrate what that's going to do and actually get something that's in the water that just doesn't create H2O Chernobyl. So I think, yeah, we have bigger problems to solve, but I think it comes down to just going back to like social media. Is it cool to be a builder? Is it cool to just continually fail? Because all the people that built potentially all the things that you even mentioned, I mean, there's just miles and miles of failures in there. But now I think it's everybody wants to be glamorous. Everybody wants to be a Kardashian or have one on their arm, and it's all about something more. And I think if we even go back 10 years prior to that, I think it was about how everything feels. Everybody has to
Mhm.
feel a certain way. Even employees. I remember there was an employee saying, "I just don't feel good here." And I was like, okay, then get a fucking job somewhere else. I mean,
Yeah.
we've created the best environment we can for you, but if you just don't feel good, it's okay. You can go. So I think it comes down to that. They want the quick money. And I think it's all about, people are so concerned about how they feel rather than, what they can do or what they've done.
Yeah, and I've heard versions of that, and I was getting lunch with some friends, and there was like a younger person in their 20s, and they sort of made that point the other day. They were like, "Yeah, if Gen Zers, like if we're not feeling something, we're just going to move on." And I was sort of like, "That's fine, but then do that, don't quiet quit, and it's just going to be more painful for you and kind of everyone else involved and everything." Yeah, and along those lines, I've thought about that too. Like, is entrepreneurship ever like can that go through like trends like in fashion of being cool or uncool? And I think that because it's hard and because it takes courage, there's something kind of timeless about it. I don't think people like intellectually choose to respect somebody that's done a hard thing, whether it's like the first person to climb Mount Everest or build a company. I think that you just kind of know it when you see it in your bones. And I don't know if that ever goes out, but I do think it can become harder or easier depending on what's going on. If I look back to like my parents' generation, like the idea of like building a successful company back then, I think was you had to be kind of crazy because for one, there was just
Hmm.
so many stable competing opportunities. This was an era where you could enter a company and be there for your whole career and probably not get fired and have a bunch of cushy benefits. That's gone, totally. Which now that I'm saying it out loud, maybe that's kind of a double-edged sword, right? Because it's like if having a job in a mid-sized company is about as risky as starting your own, like there's a lot to be said for starting your own. So I don't know. I go back and forth on it, I guess.
For sure. No, and I think yeah, it comes down to eroded trust. Used to have pensions, and there were companies that you could be a lifer at. And I think it was probably, throughout the 70s and 80s, like all that was just being whittled away and chopped away. People were losing their pensions because it wasn't invested properly, or jobs, it was just they were aging out. People living like, all right, no, we don't need you anymore, Harry. On to the next one. We got these kids with college degrees. So I think that that's a part of it. But yeah, you bring up a great point. What's the risk of working in a job that you could potentially hate or things shift versus starting your own thing and potentially failing? But I mean, going back to that Gen Zer thing where in going where it feels, you have to push through. There has to be this period of suck, of just pain. But if you keep your eye on the prize, you can push through and you can achieve more. So I think right now we got drunk on an economy over the last 10, 11 years. Everything was pretty easy. Now we're going to go into a bit of a winter. It's going to be pretty tough. Not everybody's going to make it. Some of those that have more cash on hand and more energy are going to be the ones that come out of it. Everybody's going to look at those people and the cycle begins again. Oh, we're just going to do exactly what they did. And then everything gets good again. And then it just keeps going. And I think we're at the bottom part of that period.
Yeah, it's hard to say. And it's also, I think, like easy to fool yourself with randomness, and sort of to be like, well, this deal didn't happen because of the economy. This deal happened because I'm so great,
For sure.
or whatever, or just to ascribe like little blips in the radar that would have happened no matter what, especially for companies at least my level. Like, I'm not a Fortune 500. It's like there's the big ships going through the iceberg and we're like way behind them, seeing the effects like down the road. So there's a lot of that element, but I think like the biggest question that I've been getting from agency owners and others like on calls and stuff is like, how is the economy affecting you? How is the recession
Yeah.
affecting you or your clients and this sort of thing? And like, yes, there are certain people that are like more exposed to the macro, like you said with your client. And during COVID, it was like, yeah, if you work with gyms, like of course that's going to affect things. But
Yeah.
overall, like I haven't noticed a lot of rhyme and reason based on vertical or the specialization of the service they provide. It's really like I've noticed it's more based on just the habits and the acumen of the people there and the teams. Have they, for example, like the agencies that have been building relationships and like getting up every morning, prospecting, like selling, doing that no matter what's going on, are faring better than the ones that haven't, right? Because then they've essentially developed a portfolio of opportunities versus just a few. And then if those few fail or fall apart due to the economy, then it's a worse situation. So, what's been your experience with that, though?
I think that yeah, there's some things that are happening in the economy. It's the media that controls that mentality, right? And I'm no conspiracy theorist, but if they're all saying like, "Hey, we're in a recession and it's a bad," everybody's going to just start to believe that. That's natural, but that's business. The economic conditions are going to change. The market is going to shift, and it goes in back and forth in different directions. But I think it's the people like you mentioned that get the champion status. They're going to do the reps every day, come hell or high water. They're going to do the things that they always should be doing to grow their business. And if you're not doing those things, you don't deserve to be in business. Like that, that's it. And it's just super cut and dry. So buckle down on partnerships. So your downlines and your uplines, if you're in the middle. If you're an upline, find your downlines. If you're the downline, you got plenty of upline that people can send you projects that they weren't going to take anyway. And also, anybody's profit margin is your opportunity. It's a Jeff Bezos quote. It's something too. Like lower your rates. So if you're at 150 right now and you're not winning deals, start lowering your rates to make sure that your team is fed. It's these are some of the common sense business things that you have to do. Make sure that your capacity. If you have to let people go, you have to let people go. But yeah, I think at the end of the day, make sure that you're continually doing your outbound, whether that's cold email, warm email. your awesome book, Relationships at Scale, or just going to networking meetings. There's a ton of digital networking meetings now, which I think is a really cool thing. You can just connect with people all over the country and potentially the world. And I'll go back to partnerships, the relationships that you mentioned. Make those relationships, whether that's just direct to client or with other agencies that could potentially send you projects.
Yeah, and thank you for the plug. Appreciate it. And with that, like on our last conversation, you were talking about going back to becoming a sales-driven organization. Can you talk about that
Yeah.
a little bit? Like what was going on before and what does that mean to you?
Yeah. So what we mean by a sales driven organization is, all right, we were more of a, I would say like a product company or a service company or a development company, right? It's not that we're not going to be client or customer centric. It's we need to focus everything that we're doing on driving sales and driving growth. So we've moved a layer of management. We've pulled another person in there so we can quote accurately and quickly. We still have a team selling approach, but we envelop the prospect the moment we have them qualified, and we have our team on there, and it's everybody. We're just driven to sell. We're going to pull in as many insights, add as much value as we possibly can. We're going to give them the quote that makes the absolute most sense to them, and we're going to close them as quick as we can. So we're just driving these in, pushing those into our production team, and we're just going and going, and also making sure that we're adding as much insights and value as we can on every single call. So the account managers are looking for all types of different things that they can sell or potentially move into other departments at some of these companies. And we offer three things. We're an end to end, right? So we offer everything from lead generation through digital marketing campaigns and development, all the way through software development where we build efficiencies and automation. So we're continually looking for all these different things that we can sell within a company.
Yeah, that's super interesting. There's like a lot to get into there. So what precipitated that? Like how would you describe yourself before recently, before you decided to take this focus? And what was kind of that journey of just getting back to this is what we do, we're focused on sales?
Losing.
Yeah.
I hate losing. It's not that I love winning that much. I love winning, but it's just that I hate losing. And when you lose deals and you reflect and you see why you lost them, were you too, did it take you too long to quote? Was it the people that were quoting, were their duties elsewhere? They weren't focused on this thing. So that's part of it. And also looking at like where we are and where we want to be. I think that's a very important thing that people should always look at. I can't remember what it is, but I mean, it's throughout tons of philosophers in life. Death comes, right? All right. So let's look at where we're at right now and where we want to be, because at the end of the day, this isn't going to last forever. And we have some, I would say, aggressive growth goals. And speaking with the team and just being really clear about the direction that we want to head into, there's no other way for us to survive with whether we're in a winter or the growth and keeping the employees we have than to become a sales focused organization. And then doing that, even more, we're taking on work that isn't our sweet spot. And I love that kind of stuff because that's the to me very entrepreneurial. That's why I got into business, is just to kind of figure things out. And we're hiring contractors. We're just pulling on other people and then we're figuring it out because we know what we're really good at, right? At the end of the day, we can say like, oh yeah, we're awesome at development, we're awesome at SEO. But what we're really good at is solving problems that relate to marketing and technology. And how do you solve those problems? You get really fucking smart people that are very experienced to solve those problems. So if it's something that's something we haven't worked for, whether it's a specific platform or maybe something we have no experience with, we're pulling in somebody else that has experience with this and that is their sweet spot. And we're just bringing them in as if they're the tile guy. We're not white labeling them, which is going to play the game of telephone. We're just saying like, okay, hey, based on our position, we're the home builder, and this is the person that does the best marble in the country, and they're going to help us solve this problem.
That's super interesting. So with that, why were you losing deals? Let's start there.
Losing deals was time to quote, right? So sometimes when you get brought into it, we don't really like, if there's more than like 6 agencies on it, I will go ahead and remove us. The suite is between 1 and 3, preferably 1, of course. And if you're dragging something out trying to get it quoted in time, then it's not going to work. And what I mean is like if they're like, all right, hey, we got $60,000 for this thing, can you guys do it? And then I got somebody twiddling their thumbs and they come to it 3 to 4 days later and it's not completely accurate and the client doesn't feel comfortable. That is a piece that we have removed. We now have somebody that's specifically just doing the quoting. They're not tasked with other things. That was a strategic decision. The other one I would say is potentially based on what's happening in the economy, right? And whether it is happening or not, I'm not an economist. People believe it's happening. And we're in the game of belief. They believe you're going to do something, and that if they believe something is going to have a negative impact on what's supposed to happen, that's not going to work in our favor. So I realized, okay, so if we need to set up 10 sales calls per week, we need to double down on everything. So that's also the approach that we're having. We know that our close rate has gone down. So like all the clients that we bitch about saying like, oh, we need to pull back our marketing. No, we're not doing that. We're doubling down. So that's also the reason that we've created this strategic initiative to move in this direction. Yeah, but some deals, man, dude, we are amazing at RFPs at coming in number two. And I don't even know why we still do RFPs every now and then. Like, it's just one of those things that I'm just like, all right, let's just do it. Dude, we had this amazing one. In fact, we started the process. We got into this company. They weren't even going to redevelop their site. We get in there like, you know what? We need to do this to an RFP. I was like, oh, damn it. I heard that on the call. I was like, all right. They get in and they wanted an agency that was specifically focused on exactly what they did. In hindsight, if I knew that ahead of time, I would have brought in a partner that does exactly what it is they do. We didn't have any experience with what they do, but we granted we have some things around it, right? But we lost. So right now I'm going on a moratorium, so I'll do no RFPs for a year. But I'm sure next year I'll convince myself that now is the time, and we'll do it again.
Yeah, that happens. You'll get kind of like selective memory about it, but that makes a lot of sense. So what I find interesting is the things that you're saying are not hand wavy or ephemeral. It's not like we just didn't have direction or our branding wasn't right. It's like time to quote, like measuring time to quote was actually the thing that that affected things. What has that meant for the team, right? For your sales team in particular? How has becoming sales driven again affected who you're hiring? Can you just talk a little bit about who's in what seat and kind of how you're dividing things up these days?
Yeah. So we had somebody that was in ops, right? So we have the team selling approach. So in that, there's a few reasons we do that. One is the buy-in, right? So you get buy-in from your team. There's not this lagging knowledge transfer. So any agencies that are just have a salesperson and then they're like, all right, we're going to go ahead and put this into production. There's a ton of things that you're missing out on. One is getting your team acquainted with your clients. When the team is acquainted with the clients, there is a connection there. It's not a me versus them type of scenario. We're now all in this together. So that's something that we like. The other is the familiarity based on nuances and temperature checks. When you have other team members, they can potentially see a wince that maybe you didn't when you're on a call or in a meeting with them. And you can kind of talk through those things and then use those to make your client feel more comfortable. Like, hey, we just have some intuition here and a feeling that you might not like this feature or this recommendation that we had. So that's part of it. So you have all your team members, they're putting all the pricing together. And then now we have the person that was the ops. They're just a solutionist. All they're doing is trying to create a solution for the client that they will purchase that we can deliver. They're not trying to actually figure out how to deliver and get the work done. So that was something that we realized. So that you've heard probably, I think it might have been predictable revenue and maybe some of the others where they were talking about like, all right, you have your hunter and then you have your closer.
Yeah.
Well, we have systems that are hunting and whatnot and relationships and all that. But what we look at is that we have a solutionist. So it's not necessarily a closer. If we can find a solution that makes the most sense for the amount of money that they're willing to give us for it, then we have a win. And that's the core focus of this strategy.
That's great. I'd love to dig into that a little bit. Closing dynamics in the context of a complex B2B sale, right? And there's a lot of opinions on this. I had a good conversation with my friend Jan the other day who sells to small law firms, right? And he's like, got a great sales process. And it's all about they're getting that credit card on that call, right? And if somebody doesn't want to give them the credit card, they go for the no and they make it happen. That is obviously a harder thing to do when you're talking about 5, 6, 7-figure offers, big ticket offers in a B2B situation. But his argument is basically like, look, if you genuinely believe that this is the best solution for them and them not giving you that credit card could lead to a 1 to X% chance of them not doing this thing that you've both agreed is the best thing, then you're actually doing a disservice by not getting them to do that. The logistics are more complicated in a bigger organization, bigger sale, et cetera. Asking for a credit card live on a call is going to be weird. But how do you think about closing dynamics?
I think it's important. We take things off the table all the time. Those are the words that we use. Like, all right, we're going to take that off the table. We're not going to move in that direction. So I think challenging them in a positive and compassionate way is always good. We had a deal where it was a SaaS company. It was just 2 weeks ago. And what the guy wanted made absolutely no sense for the budget. So we just had to be real. And then in being real, pretty much telling him we're not going to work with him, which I was being genuine about, wasn't tactical at all. just made him want to work with us more. And I think it's, if you're going to be authentic about it, then I think absolutely go for it, where you can do what you're saying. But as far as the dynamics, I think it's just that, just be real, let them know that you can or cannot help, and just call them out on the things that are bullshit. If they're trying to work you or get a deal, I call that out all the time. Like, dude, are you like my Uncle Dino? I mean, you want to get a deal here? Or you want something that fell off the back of a truck? If so, like, just call that out and I'll tell you what we can do for that. So I think that's very important. And when it comes to closing, there's owners and then there's the employees that work for owners. It is so unfair to the employees. Somebody that is an amazing salesperson, that's an employee, that's a solid closer, is worth their weight in gold. Because especially when it comes to the agency business, dude, we're the owner. We can do whatever we want. We have as much dynamism to shift and change. And oh yeah, we'll move that around. The other guy or gal, like, if they're empowered to a certain extent, they still have that, but there's got to be that fear that not only is it the deal not going to go through, but they're also going to hear flack from one of the owners. So if I just had to sum that up, I'd say be as authentic as possible. And if you have an employee that's an amazing closer, you better be treating him or her like gold, because they're worth every penny.
Yeah, let's talk about that a little bit. We've hired a lot of salespeople through the years here and gotten the right number of times, gotten it really wrong a lot of times. What do you look for now in a closer? Like, what are the things you're prioritizing?
It's funny you mention that. So we're going to start critical thinking tests, right? So I want to see, I was speaking with another agency owner the other day that he started this about 4 years ago. So anybody that doesn't pass his critical thinking test isn't on his team, because you get rid of that whole inability to self-start, inability to solve problems. And with that, we've all had that great interview. We're like, oh, this is a salesperson. And of course they're going to interview great because they're selling me. But then again, you'll run into these other people that it seems like they couldn't even hold a conversation with anybody, and their numbers are through the roof. So those are potentially some of the things that we're looking for. What I'm telling you is we get it wrong a lot. We've had people that have been on our sales team that everything looked amazing, all their numbers, but then you actually sit on calls with them and you're like, dude, no wonder this guy's not closing any deals. Like, I mean, he doesn't even know anything about what we're talking about, or he gets so nervous that he just forgets all of these things. And if you're gonna, I can't change that. There's no level of comfort I'm going to be able to give that person that's going to instill that knowledge where they can fire when the questions are coming at them. But to that, you have a team selling approach, you can have some of those other people that are in there. So we actually shifted that person to more of that hunter role, pulling things in, where they just ultimately failed. So I don't have a good answer for that, man. All I know is I just got miles of failures of things that don't work. But the one thing I can count on is if it's a critical thinker that people like, that can speak eloquently about what you do, your probabilities are substantially higher.
Yeah, and it's because it's a consultative, complex sale. They're not
Totally.
selling widgets. With that, this is like a standardized test, or how are you thinking about it?
Yeah, it's a standardized test. I think it's through Test Gorilla, right? So I went through this with him. And then in there, and dude, it's like super cheap. It's like $300 or something like that for like 100 tests. And yeah, anybody that's new that's going to come on the team, that's exactly what we're going to test them with. We want to understand how they think, how they solve problems, and essentially what drives them. And at that point, we're going to just continually build on that knowledge base, because babysitting culture, especially when you want to be growth driven, you can't have that. Like, all your tasks laid out. You got to have somebody that is willing to do whatever they can to move the deal forward without insulting or losing trust with the client.
Yeah, and one thing, so we've gone through the motions of hiring for sales, and I'm sort of back in that seat for a little bit until we get the next person ramped up. And I think one mistake we made with the last one was it was somebody that wasn't a fit, but we gave them so much time and so much energy and a huge investment over the course of many months and the reason we did many months is we're like, well, our sales cycle is long. It's a complex sales cycle. We want to give them more time than we would normally need to close these deals and give them enough at bats to test them. And I never want to do that again. I want to find something that's going to like be a falsifiable test that we can run in 30 days and figure out if somebody's a fit. And one thing we're doing is we're not going to hire that full stack closer right away. We're going to go for somebody that's kind of like a BDR, although they're not the full-on traditional BDR, because we're getting the meetings through our systems and what we know to work, but they're handling that first call. Because what I found is like that's the most time-consuming thing, is like qualifying people, talking to all these people that you can qualify out quickly. That's where the time lives. And then I'll be involved in later steps of the process and that kind of thing. But anyway, I love to compare notes on that. Like, is there anything that you guys are doing in the first 1 to 3 months or so to test people out beyond the critical thinking thing?
Yeah. So what we've done in the past, and I like you, yeah, like I've shifted over and I'm primary point on our sales. I've gotten rid of a few of them, but I've moved some just to commission only. And then with the ones that went to commission only, it was simple. It was okay, I want you to create the sales plan. They create the sales plan. All right, based on this sales plan, you're supposed to generate X number of sales. If this doesn't happen by this period, you could do 1 month or 3 months, depending on what your sales cycle is, saying, okay, you're not going to work here anymore. That's it. Because at the end of the day, I have to cut you a check. I have KPIs that I have to hit. And if I don't hit those, I get fired. I get fired essentially just by the circumstances that are around me. So it's just the same thing. And I love being a compassionate person, but at the end of the day, I think there are just too many variables that can happen, similar to what you've been through. And dude, I've been through that so many times that's it. You're committing to what you're promising, that you can do this thing. You're putting that plan together. And if you hit that, cool, then we're going to keep moving. And then if not, based on the plan that you have, you ultimately failed based on your own admission.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. And is there anything else you've kind of learned from the recent process? Like anything else, any tweaks you guys are making? Like you talked about time to quote. Is there anything else that like you focused on lately?
I'd say time to quote is a solid one. I also think you need to have, it's a high involvement purchase, so you need to have it spaced out. So I love what your buddy's doing, where they're closing on the sale where they're getting that credit card. But I think when it is higher numbers, you need to give them time to think and then time to reflect. If you're overly aggressive, it's not going to go well. Either you're going to miss something or they're going to be unhappy in that, where they feel like they've been bamboozled. So I think that's still there. So I would say a minimum of 3 calls would occur from qualification all the way to close. The other thing is selling, kind of contrarian to my point, is selling the smallest thing you can immediately. So I think too many people will go for that 60K plus 120K plus deal. Whereas, can you sell them something for $500?
Yeah.
If you can sell them something small, immediately, you're already creating a transaction. It's kind of that old school thing. You're getting them used to signing. That's something that we've moved to. So we got away from, we would do like sell discoveries and strategies. So what we're doing now is we're just selling briefs, which is just smaller. All right. So we would sell a discovery or strategy starting at like 7,500 plus. And now we're starting a brief starting at like 2,000 to like $4,000. So all we're going to do is we're going to scope out this little finite thing. And it's also good for your team. You're doing a team selling approach. You're filling their capacity by doing this small thing, even though it's only going to take a couple days or a week. And you're also getting the client used to paying for your thinking. So that's one of the things that we've shifted. And we don't force that. We make it their decision, where we tell people, like, there's 2 ways to move forward with us. Give us a number, or we're going to tell you how to get to that number. And you're going to have to pay for it to tell you how to get to that number. And they're very comfortable with that through a series of conversations where they're signing up to do briefs.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And sometimes those things can actually be higher margin and it ends up being better in a lot of ways than
Totally.
the big thing. So that's great. And it also creates kind of that like option-based selling dynamic that you essentially have at a restaurant. If
Yeah.
you go to a burger joint that has one thing on the menu and you're like, I'm not in the mood for burgers, you leave. If you go to the restaurant, you're finding something you want and you're probably probably going to order it. So
Yeah.
there's something to that. With that, with the few minutes we have left, I mean, you talked about kind of figuring out where you want to be. And we've talked to a lot of people on the show about that topic. And I've noticed that like there's some people that have gotten acquired and have focused on that from day one. And then, but most people have kind of like stumbled into that as an option. How did you figure out the long-term vision? Did you do shrooms and go swimming with spider monkeys, or how did that play out?
No, they were piranhas. I like a little
Piranhas,
danger with
yeah,
mushrooms.
yeah,
No, I think it was looking at like what's happening, right? So when you see there's a lot of like niche focused agencies, which I think is a great model. It hasn't made sense for us yet. Granted, we work in specific verticals. And thinking about when it comes to like web development, like AI, you got all these things that are going to make that site or whatnot, and just spin it right up. And that's been happening over the last like 20 years. Everybody has these site builders and easier. So what I envision is, how can we put ourselves in that consultancy seat where we're competing with like Deloitte and some of these others, but we're like half the price, right? We're boutique. So we can do that. And we're winning deals on that by positioning ourselves as the consultancy, just pulling in the team members necessary to be able to accomplish those projects. So we're getting away from that babysitter club, tried and true task manager. This is our process and this is the way we do it for AdWords, so on and so forth, which we're doing a more bespoke, tailored, white glove approach and saying, no, well, I mean, yeah, you can do it that way. That's fine. Or it also puts us in the position saying, we're just going to hire that guy that does it that way. And we're going to put a premium on top of that because this is our thinking and you trust us to do this. And these are the miles of experience we have to prove it. So that's our vision and where we want to go. It's not the safest, which also adds comfort there because typically if it's comfortable, it's not something that's actually worth doing. And in that, I think we're going to be able to rise above. We'll be a technology and marketing consultancy rather than just a traditional dev or digital agency.
Yeah, and I think that there's definitely something to be said for that. I don't think niching is the only way. I think where it causes problems is when people have kind of like one foot in both worlds,
Yeah, good point.
the middle of the barbell. So as always, man, this is a lot of fun. Thank you for being such a great friend of the show. Let's do it again. Let's see kind of how things have evolved in 6 or 12 months.
Yeah, man. Appreciate it, buddy.
By the way, anything you're promoting up to, anything you want to talk about?
Digital Mastermind Group, man. If you're an agency owner and you want to hang out with a bunch of other agency owners and join a group think that is a lot of people potentially even smarter than myself, where we're having these types of conversations, then that's the group for you. You can visit digitalmastermind.com, shoot me an email, John@digitalmastermind. Love to have a conversation with you.
Yeah, and it's a good excuse just to go down to sunny Florida and enjoy yourself as opposed to any other cold place. So thank you, sir.
Awesome, man. I appreciate it, buddy.
Likewise.